Adam Smith is called the father of economics. He published in 1776, 400 years earlier, a judge in North Africa had already described the division of labor, the labor theory of value, supply and demand, and the tax curve. His name was Ibn Khaldun, and almost no economics degree mentions him. This is the Muqaddimah, not a book about economics, a book about why societies work, which had to invent economics along the way. His name was Abd al-Rahman ibn Khaldun, born in Tunis in 1332 to a family of Andalusian exiles. The Black Death killed both his parents when he was 17. He spent his 20s and 30s as a court official for a series of North African rulers, advising them, negotiating for them, occasionally being jailed by them. In 1375, he retreated to a castle in what is now Algeria, and in 4 years wrote the Muqaddimah, an introduction to history that ended up inventing a discipline. He wanted to know why the same collapse kept happening, not who conquered whom, but the mechanism underneath. And then, at the very end of his life, he did something almost no scholar has ever done. In 1401, Timur, the conqueror Europe called Tamerlane, laid siege to Damascus. Ibn Khaldun was inside the city. He had himself lowered over the wall by rope and walked into the camp of the most feared man alive. He stayed there 35 days. Timur questioned him about North Africa, and Ibn Khaldun wrote him a report on it. He also negotiated safe passage for Damascus's civilians. Think about what that means. The man who wrote the theory of how conquerors rise and states fall spent 5 weeks interviewing one, in person, at the height of his power. He was not a theorist who had read about power. He had sat across from it. Ibn Khaldun argued that the value of a thing is the labor embedded in it, not its weight in gold, not what a ruler decrees, but the human work it took to bring into being. Marx and Ricardo are credited with this. Ibn Khaldun wrote it in 1377. Profit, he said, is the value realized from human labor. Wealth that appears without labor, somewhere behind it, is not created. It is moved. He begins with bread. One person cannot grow, thresh, mill, and bake alone in any useful quantity. Civilization exists because labor divides. The larger the cooperating group, the more surplus per person, which is the entire logic of the city. So for Ibn Khaldun, a city is not a place. It is a density of cooperation. And when cooperation thins, the city keeps its walls and loses its purpose. His answer starts with a word that has no clean English translation. Asabiyyah, group feeling, social cohesion, the willingness of people to sacrifice for each other without being paid to. Ibn Khaldun argued that Asabiyyah is what builds states. A group with fierce solidarity and little to lose overwhelms a comfortable one. But here is the trap. The victory itself destroys the thing that won it. The first generation builds. The second inherits and consolidates. The third has never known hardship and imitates the forms of greatness without understanding them. The fourth believes the wealth was always simply there. Crucially, Ibn Khaldun did not call this moral decay. He called it structural. The conditions that produce the discipline are dissolved by the success. Then comes the part economists rediscovered 600 years later. Ibn Khaldun noticed that early dynasties collect enormous revenue from very light taxes, and late dynasties collect very little from crushing ones. His formulation: at the start, small assessments yield large revenue. At the end, large assessments yield small revenue. Why? Because the late state has expenses the early state never had: a bureaucracy, a standing army, a court that expects luxury. So it raises rates. Producers respond by producing less. The base shrinks faster than the rate rises. In 1974, the economist Arthur Laffer sketched this on a napkin, and it became the Laffer curve. Laffer credited Ibn Khaldun by name, but the medieval version is sharper. because Ibn Khaldun cared less about the rate than about what the state had become. His deeper claim: dynasties fail when the elite stops making things and starts collecting from people who do. He wrote about rulers entering commerce and competing with their own merchants, about confiscation, about monopoly. He had a word for this class of behavior: zulm, injustice, and he treated it as an economic variable, not a moral one, because it destroys umran, civilization, the productive fabric itself. That is the test, not how high the taxes are, whether the people at the top are producing or extracting. Ibn Khaldun drew a line that we have almost entirely forgotten how to draw. On one side, the merchant, someone who buys, carries, improves, and sells, and whose profit is the reward for having done something. On the other, the courtier, someone whose income comes from proximity to power, from a grant, a license, a protected position. He was not sentimental about merchants. He thought commerce was hard and often grubby, but he insisted the distinction mattered, because the two produced different societies. A society of merchants keeps discovering things. A society of courtiers keeps dividing them. And he observed something uncomfortable. As states mature, the smartest people stop becoming merchants. They become courtiers, not from greed, but from arithmetic. That is simply where the returns moved. He described what happens when a good is scarce and wanted, and when it is plentiful and ignored, and he described it as a regularity, not a moral failing. Prices to him were information about the world, and he was blunt about money. Gold and silver are a measure of value, not value itself. A state that accumulates metal while its people stop producing has not grown rich. It has only concentrated the counters. Ottoman scholars read him. European economics, when it formed, largely did not. Whether his ideas reached Smith or Ricardo is genuinely unsettled, and anyone who tells you it is proven is overreaching. What is not in doubt is that he got there first. He was rediscovered in the 19th century, and economists who read him properly tend to come away unsettled, because the questions he asked about production and extraction are the ones the disciplines still cannot fully answer. Ibn Khaldun's economics was never really about money. It was about whether a society still makes things. Every civilization he studied answered that question the same way, eventually. He simply wrote down what the answer looked like on the way down. Next time, what happens when we apply his test to a country that is running the experiment right now?